Morning, Chair, Conference. My name is Mary Callaghan. I'm from Unite the Union, proud and honoured to be moving this motion on behalf of all those women at Labour Women's Conference earlier this year. Delegates, we heard incredibly powerful and heartbreaking speeches made by our women members, recounting their direct experience of the long wait for care, the very low pay and poor conditions of care workers, the horrifying experiences of universal credit and the destruction it has had on our lives and the lives of our loved ones. So when, just last week, David Cameron, in selling his memoirs, tells the Today programme that he was proud of Ian Duncan Smith's work, I can only be struck by the cruelty and continued inhumanity of the Tories. But Conference, so much of the debate at Women's Conference and why I am proud to be moving this motion is that it was not just about despair. It was also about Labour's solutions. The commitments to transforming the very structure of our economy, to put women and equality at the heart of our society. Rather than tinker around the edges is what my union and what I, as a worker, a Unite rep in a food factory and a Labour activist, have fought so hard for decades to achieve. When Laura Pidcock spoke at TUC about what Labour would do in government to strengthen trade union and employment rights, to bring about a change of power in our workplaces, creating sectorial collective bargaining, and to bring in statutory rights for equality reps, Laura spoke about how it would change the lives of tens of millions of workers for the better. The low-paid care worker with the poor conditions we heard about at the Women's Conference would be properly valued. By ending austerity and rebuilding our public services, by having a social security system that enables, rather than punishes, like universal credit does, by putting equality at the heart, rather than as an afterthought, we can end and bring about real change. But to do that, we need to unite, fight and win a Jeremy Corbyn-led Labour government. And I believe we can and we will. I move.
Katie.
Katie Dunning, CWU, speaking on behalf of the Labour Women's Conference. As Mary indicated, this motion came from the first ever standalone Women's Conference. Everyone at that conference walked away feeling very united and optimistic. We've fought long and hard for a standalone Women's Conference, and it's vital that that continues in the future. Conference, it's a long motion and I've only got 2 minutes, so I'll try and keep it as short as possible. Over the last decades, we have seen undeniable strides forward in achieving equality across our society. However, there are still many barriers to overcome in the struggle for justice for women. Nowhere is clearer than in regards to the gender pay gap that exists across our economy. We cannot stick with the status quo. We cannot afford to wait until 2073 for the closure of that gender pay gap to materialise. And equally, we cannot allow employers to hide behind simply looking after the minority of women at senior management level and those that are members of boards. Conference, our party has a track record when it comes to fighting for inequality and overcoming injustices. Labour brought in the Equal Pay Act, the Sexual Discrimination Act, the Equality Act, the minimum wage, and introduced Sure Start. And we welcome Angela Rayner's pledge yesterday to reintroduce Sure Start Plus. I was proud to vote in the transformative 2017 manifesto, which promised new politics and a new economy. I'm proud that the CWU has been part of this motion in building on that 2017 manifesto in a way that puts gender equality at the heart of everything that we do in government, from trade unions to economic democracy, from tackling gender pay gap to ending the scandal of universal credit. Conference, while the economics of the past have encouraged division, as a party we can offer a hopeful alternative for a more equitable future. I second.
Conference, I'll take some speakers in a few moments, but first we are going to consider an emergency motion on justice for rape survivors from Taunton Deane CLP. Can I see the delegate from Taunton Deane to move the motion? We're here. Are Taunton Deane here? Can we come back and take some speakers? Okay, we'll come back to that and take some speakers from in the debate. Can I see three to start with? So there's one there. Yes, the accessibility steward at the back, and person in the stripy top down at the front here. Just to remind you, if you're called, you need to register at the desk before coming up to the podium. And I really want to get in as many speakers as possible, so I'm going to try and be quite strict and ask you to stick to the 3 minutes, because, you know, a lot of people have a lot to say on this. It's a really important issue. Two minutes. Is it? Okay.
Comrades, good morning. I'm Fran Springfield from Vauxhall CLP, and I'm also the co-chair of Disability Labour. Quick service announcement. We also are providing mental health first aid services in conference, especially for disabled delegates. Do go to our store if people need that level of support. Thank you. Okay, I'm sitting here because I know that we must stop and scrap universal credit. It is the only way to change the current punitive benefit system. I don't want to see any longer people having to choose between heating and eating or losing their homes because they cannot get their benefit payments on time. Nothing of that is acceptable within this society or indeed in a Labour government. That is why we have to stop and scrap. Disability Labour have actually been working really hard for the last 6 months, designing a new compassionate benefit system, which would have questionnaires which actually look at what would help disabled people either to get into work or to become more independent, but actually to live our lives as we want to do. We should have assistance to eat and drink and to eat nutritious meals. We should have personal care which enables us to go out of our front doors looking smart and reasonable. We should have support to do simple things like access adult education if we want to do so, or heaven forbid, actually do some disability campaigning.
Delegate, time's up.
Whilst I'm a member of the MPF, and I have sat on the Work Pensions and Equalities Committee...
Delegate, we really need to get everyone in, so
right,
last sentence, please.
Right, okay. Brighton comrades will write on their references back. Please support the references back and stop and scrap. Thank you.
Next delegate, please.
Good morning, comrades. My name's Denai Savidu, and I'm from Stroud District CLP. This is my first general conference, but I spoke in support of this motion at Women's Conference in Telford. I spoke about my experience as a lone parent and about using a food bank to feed my toddler. We actually had a delivery because I didn't have enough money to get the bus to the food bank. Our welfare state used to be a safety net for vulnerable people, but due to years of vicious Tory cuts, it has been turned into a trap of pain, suffering, and humiliation. In what society do working parents have to choose between buying food and paying utility bills? In what society do terminally ill people get declared fit to work? I want my daughter to grow up in a society of justice and compassion. And for that to happen, we need people who aren't afraid to raise their voices. And that is why I am standing for Stroud District Council in 2020, because someone has to tell them. And that is why, comrades, we need a Jeremy Corbyn-led Labour government. Thank you.
Good morning, conference. My name's Ellie. I'm from Rugby PLC, first-time delegate and first-time speaker. Rugby was one of the first areas of this country to see the rollout of universal credit, and we have been suffering ever since. We have parents unable to feed themselves and their children, and our food bank usage in the town has gone up. We have also seen the results of universal credit having an impact on our local economy. Our high street is suffering because when people cannot feed themselves or their children, they cannot contribute to society. The outright cruelty that the successive Tory governments have put into the benefit system is nothing short of criminal. They have blood on their hands. And this includes things like the PIP payments. My friend Emily lives in Salford and she has a debilitating illness, which means that she has to use the toilet up to 60 times a day, and she is in excruciating pain 24/7. She has lost 3 jobs as a result of her illness. Her last employer fired her because it was unethical of them to keep her on as an employed person. But the government has stopped her PIP payments and has declared her fit for work. Conference, we need a Labour government to put dignity, care, support back into our benefit system and to put human decency back into the heart of government for those who need it most. I support this motion.
So we now have Taunton Dean ready to move. I'm going to just choose 3 more people who can be coming to the front while Taunton Dean get ready to move. There's a person right over there with a red shirt, yeah. Delegate in a turquoise top, yes. And at the back over there, can you, yes, the person who, no, not you. You. Okay, can I see Taunton Dean to move the emergency motion on justice for rape survivors, please?
Hello, Conference. My name is Lisa Martin and I'm from the Taunton Dean CLP. I'm a first-time delegate, first-time speaker, and I'm also standing here as a rape survivor. Today I'm here calling for justice for rape survivors, and we'd also like to thank Richard Bergen for his attention to this yesterday in his speech. Just 34% of rape cases referred to the CPS during 2018 to 19 resulted in a charge. This is a decrease of almost 30% since 2014. Since 2017, completed prosecutions have fallen by a third, and convictions fell by 27%. I would like to highlight that rape is not just a statistic. Rape is carried by the survivors for life. Sarah Crew, Deputy Police Chief for Avon and Somerset, recently said that we have a justice system that is stretched and under pressure. Victims Commissioner and former Labour MP, Dame Vera Baird QC, stated that this was a deliberate policy by the CPS to improve their conviction rate by abandoning thousands of cases of potentially traumatised men and women who looked to the CPS for support. Conference, this is a national crisis. Our country has fallen victim of a Tory government. When justice is foregone for the sake of profit margins, it is the Labour Party's duty to reclaim justice for the people. Comrades, we must say no more to austerity. We must insist that these victims' voices are heard in a court of law. We must win the next general election and once again have a government, a country and a justice system that we are proud of. I urge you all to support this motion. Thank you.
Can I see someone to second the motion from the floor, if anyone's willing to do that? Yeah, thank you. Right.
Colleagues, comrades, conference, I stand here in support of the motion and also stand here in support of those colleagues from the Women's Conference, the first ever. I represent Great Yarmouth as a county and borough councillor, and for the last 3 years I've seen some of the most appalling experiences of poverty that have been forced upon a community by cruel Tory administration. I've seen lives decimated. I have had people come to my door begging for food because of a 7-week wait on money in order to keep their children and themselves alive. Now, if that is an indication of Tory consideration, I want shot of it. I want rid of universal credit and every aspect of its malicious, cruel, unfeeling, systematic torture to people that have got nothing to be ashamed of apart from the fact that they've been put in a position of never-ending poverty. And when you get to a stage of life where you consider that the best option is possibly suicide, like again people have told me that they've been resorted to, then you know that we have got to support this motion. We have got to support those prospective candidates that want to oust those Tory administrators of crime, of cruelty. And we've got to stand up for a government of Labour representatives that are going to make the change that our country is crying out for. I say, please understand what people are experiencing. Please support this motion. And please let's make the change for the good of our country. Thank you.
Conference, Katrina Goldman, a proud Unison delegate and proud to be Telford's parliamentary candidate for Labour. Speaking in support of the composite motion, Universal Credit and Employment Support. This motion came out of Women's Conference and I was delighted to host that in Telford, my hometown. When even the UN identifies such a gender dimension to welfare reforms in the UK that it means, and I quote, if you got a group of misogynists in a room and said, how can we make this system work for men and not for women? They would not have come up with too many ideas that are not in place. Universal credit causes absolute poverty for women and their families. We have lone parents, 90% of whom are women, losing as much as £2,000 a year. Women in abusive relationships made financially dependent on their abuser because universal credit is paid into a single account. I've seen in my own constituency the terrible impact of this destructive policy. We all agree that universal credit is this, and that it is not a credit but a cruelty. Not a universal cruelty, though. The spiteful and regressive regime is forced on the most vulnerable people in our society. Women, BME women, disabled women have borne the brunt of this cruel government's austerity. Because of this, Labour has already challenged the government to tackle the 10 biggest failings of this universal credit. And when we kick this government out, we must implement them. Richard Burgon set out yesterday that we will repeal cuts to the legal aid system, which impact heavily on women in violent and coercive relationships. But conference, that's not enough. We must commit to scrap universal credit. But we need to do this carefully. We cannot leave the victims of universal credit in a rolling limbo the same as the cruel Tory government has left them in for years. This is why this motion urges for a redesign of benefits, in consultation with recipients, workers, trade unions and women's organisations. We must replace universal credit with a progressive benefit system that promotes equality, combats the cause of poverty, abolishes the punitive sanctions and eradicates the need for food banks. Thank you.
Morning conference, my name's Rachel, I'm from Dartford CLP and I'm a first-time delegate to conference like many of you. So we are a party of campaigners and what we do our very best is stick up for the underrepresented, the undervalued and the under-resourced. What I'm going to speak to you about is a disproportionately women's issue but also a welfare issue, and that is our unpaid carers. There are 8 million individuals in the UK. There are 8 million of them in the UK and they are the sticking plaster for the underfunded social care system and RNHS. Without them, millions of people with long-term health and mental care needs would not be supported. 3 in 5 of us will be a carer at some point in our lives. Some of you will be carers without even realising the shopping that you're getting for your loved ones, the prescriptions you're collecting, the appointments you're accompanying them to. These are all caring roles. I'm a carer. I'm a campaigner. I help to care for my mum, and that's a responsibility I take seriously, and I'm really proud to undertake. Being a carer affects every part of your life, from financial security, your future, your health, your mental well-being. You're more likely to have a stroke than the rest of the population. 600 people each day are giving up work because they can't do it alongside caring for somebody. Carers have been shockingly treated by the Conservative government. We no longer have a national carer strategy. It was promised and kicked into the long grass. Basically, we've been waiting for 3.5 years for the promised social care strategy. Not acceptable. Carers continue to use paid holiday time up to take their loved one to hospital appointments, and there's no statutory carers leave. Should they get a break, they often use it to catch up on their own sleeper appointments. I don't think that's acceptable. Whilst Brexit continues to rumble on, real carers and the people they care for are struggling to cope right now. And yet they provide the equivalent of £132 billion.
Delegate, your time's up. Can you give us your last sentence, please?
So that's essentially it. They provide the equivalent of £132 billion of input to the economy annually. I support the motion and thank you so much. Thank you.
Conference, sorry to speed things along. We've got a lot to pack in this morning. Our second debate of the day is on the economy, business and trade. And once again, we start with references back. And we only have one from Brighton Pavilion in this session. Does anyone else wish to move a reference back? This is the point at which you do it, and it has to be precise. No? Brighton Pavilion, then, to move your reference back. And as mentioned earlier, these are detailed in the CAC report today. What's it? Is he Brighton Pavilion? I should have got them to be ready. We should be a bit better at thinking ahead.
I'm Lewis Crenett from Brighton Pavilion, moving a reference back on page 44, the third of the 4 paragraphs. Labour Party policy is to repeal the anti-trade union laws. The 2017 conference voted for it, and repealing of the 2016 Trade Union Act was in the manifesto. I was therefore really surprised not to find it in this policy document on the economy, and that's why I'm referencing back. 40 years ago, to implement their pernicious neoliberal economic model, the Tories passed laws to undermine and weaken organised labour and the trade unions. They led to insecure and precarious employment, low pay, outsourcing, 0 hours contracts, unpaid trial shifts and much more. When we elect a Labour government and Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister, we are going to transform the economy and give working people dignity and control of their terms and conditions of work.
Finish up, please.
The right to strike, the right to picket, free collective bargaining, and the thing bosses hated most, the closed shop.
Stop talking
that
now,
gives
please.
working people control over who works in their industry.
Thank you.
Taking back control, comrades.
Thank you, Delegate. Thank you, Conference. We now move to our composite motions. Oh, okay. Sorry, we need to take any speeches or in favour or against the reference back, if anyone has one, before we get moved to the composites. Nope. Okay. No. We move to our composite motions. So the first is composite 6 on industrial strategy. That's going to be moved by Unite the Union, seconded by ASLEF. And if other delegates who are moving and seconding composites could start thinking about being in the right place at the right time, that would be also useful. Thank you.
Okay. Chair Conference, Len McCluskey, Unite, moving composite 6. Comrades, 4 years ago, something special happened, and it has changed British politics forever. A decent man, a genuine socialist, was elected as leader of our Labour Party. And my union has sought to support Jeremy Corbyn ever since, because it is only a Jeremy Corbyn-led government that gives us hope. Only his radical vision can lead to the irreversible shift in power to working people that we desperately need. It's sometimes been a tough fight against those without and those within our party who reject that vision. But we have got this far, comrades. We've got this far because of our unity. and because our new agenda reflects the common sense of our times. We have an emerging generation that has only known austerity. Austerity thrust on us by the Tories and the Liberal Democrat partners. Joe Swinson doesn't like Jeremy, and the Labour Party apparently. Well, the feeling's mutual. Her party gave us austerity and destroyed our communities. She voted in favour of every attack on our welfare state, and we won't forget that. She reminds us that you can never trust a Liberal Democrat. Comrades, our country is crying out for an alternative to austerity economics and neoliberal dogma that has just thrown Thomas Cook to the wall along with thousands of jobs. This composite sets out what is needed. We want one thing: a progressive Labour government that will govern in the interests of working people. To get there, we must not be sidetracked. Unity got us where we are. Only division conference can derail us now. From Brexit to the banks, the country needs to hear a united Labour voice arguing for that brighter future. Let me say here that Jeremy Corbyn is 1,000 times right in trying to speak to our whole country at this time of crisis, when we have the Tories dismissing half our nation and the Liberals are writing off the other half. It is only Jeremy's Labour that puts social justice, that says whether you are Leave or Remain matters less than your class. We should not let anyone we should not let anyone define us or divide us as Leavers or Remainers. What defines us is that we are socialists, and our vision of a better Britain, a better world is within our grasp. I beg you, comrades, keep your eyes on the prize. In a general election campaign, people will see that only Labour offers policies to create a better and a fairer Britain, policies to heal our nation, securing our future with large-scale investment in our infrastructure and an industrial strategy that stimulates our manufacturing base, protects public services, provides decent work, builds homes, gives workers and their trade unions dignity and respect. People are sick of the lies that fall so easily from our Prime Minister's mouth, aided and abetted by a cabinet of millionaires who'll rake it in as our people are sent to the dole queues. The only antidote to the crooks of the Brexit Party and the charlatans in Number 10 is a Corbyn-led government. Comrades, it's our responsibility, it's our duty as trade unionists and all of us here to ensure Labour wins the election. Unite, I pledge, will not be wanting. We are a socialist party, and we are united in wanting to live a profound and lasting change for our people. I'll end on this. There's only one door to Number 10, comrades, and we can only go through it if we go through it together. I implore you, please give Jeremy the support he needs later so that Prime Minister Corbyn can lead us to a bright new dawn. I move.
Thank you, Delegate. As left to second the motion.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, What Conference. What Len said. And while we're talking about industrial strategy, can I thank Richard Leonard for promising to take our railways of Scotland back into national ownership. Thank you, Richard. Conference. We are consistently told that technology is changing our world. We must move with the times. The economy is changing and therefore the world of work must change also. And yes, this is true. We aren't Luddites. Our movement is based on progress. The Labour movement must embrace technology. It makes us a prosperous country, a more efficient country, and a country that improves the quality of life for the many, with better jobs and a just transition. But for too long, many of these voices have been used to encourage neoliberalism and a race to the bottom, and an excuse to neglect our core industries. We have to get the politicians to stop piping up about the need for industrial strategy, but act on an industrial strategy. We need a world that looks 10, 20, 30 years from now to the needs of our children and our grandchildren, and to create a better future with real work that pays and no in-work poverty. Well, Conference, it's time for action. Because there'll never be an act that deals with the housing crisis, crumbling transport networks, or inadequate school and hospital buildings. The only way to deal with this is a strategy based around the need for a better infrastructure that boosts construction and looks at social impact of procurement in the supply chain, that creates apprenticeships and creates a proper educated future. But Conference at its core, a Labour industrial strategy must deal with the biggest challenge of our times, climate change. We must electrify our railways and have a properly integrated multimodal transport system, build housing that's designed to produce less carbon and is affordable, make sure our schools, hospitals and public buildings are energy efficient. But at the core of this, trade union voices must be central to this strategy. And whilst I'm here, trade union voices must also be central to our party. Our party was established on the voice of organised labour. The clue is in the name. Trade unions created the party, and comrades, if the collective voices of train drivers, nurses, school support staff, postal workers, firefighters, shop workers diminished, this party would no longer be worthy of its name. So we must work together. So, Conference, climate change has been one of the free market's biggest failures, and we can't listen to Trump and the deniers. Dealing with it must be one of Labour movement's greatest successes. Let's get Jeremy into number 10 and have an industrial strategy that deals with climate change, rebuilds our infrastructure and works for the many, not the few.
The next motion is Composite 7 on insourcing, and that's to be moved by unison.
Thank you. Linda Hobson, Unison, moving Composite 7 on insourcing. Conference, for decades, my union has fought the privatisation of our public services, and what we know is what we've been saying for years, that privatisation has failed. It failed in the 80s, it failed in the 90s, and it's still failing today. The costs are borne by the workforce, future generations, and people who desperately need those services. Privatisation has been a disaster for public service workers. 1 million decent jobs gone from our local communities. Our elderly, our frail, our vulnerable, suffering like never before. Privatised care services collapsing on the brink, starved of money, in total meltdown, public sector jobs, good jobs, hived off to those who care more about private profit than they do about public good. The rich and the powerful are immune to the damage that it causes, but those of us who rely on public services aren't. Our people, struggling to get by with fewer resources, to work with less and less pay in their pockets. And while the public funds are siphoned off and slipped into the pockets of the powerful and the seedy of the world of offshore companies, Conference, it's an absolute outrage. It's an outrage that we must end. So we need to step up our fight to bring our public services back in-house. Not some, not when contracts end, but every single one of them, all back in house where they belong. And I say to the doubters who tell us it costs too much money, I'll tell you where you can get the money from. Close the tax havens, end the loopholes, and make sure that those who can't afford to pay shoulder the burden of the funding decently publicly owned public services. We welcome the party's Democratising Public Services report, a significant first step towards ending the privatisation of public services. But we must go further. Last year, this conference unanimously gave a commitment to bringing all services back in. All services back in under the next Labour government. And we want that to be a day one commitment. Today, I ask you to reaffirm that commitment, ensuring that our party in government puts ending the scourge of privatisation a priority for our country. Better public services, not services run for private gain. Properly funded, not cut to the bone. Decent paid workers, not care workers, nurses and teaching assistants struggling to get by. That's the change our party can deliver, and it's a change that we must deliver. Conference, I move.
Can I see GMB to second?
Barbara Plant, GMB Delegate and GMB National President, seconding Composite 7. Conference, privatisation has been a failed 40-year experiment. Where outsourcing has happened in public services, we have seen costs overrun, workers' rights watered down and communities let down. The Tory government has spent the last 9 years cutting funding, forcing through reorganisations, out-of-control outsourcing and privatisation, and our public services are close to breaking point. GMB represent members who work in public services in every town and every city across the country. The workers who have to face the worst of Tory privatisation, and it is on behalf of those workers we vote for at this conference. They are our colleagues, neighbours, friends and families. Conference, our members are rightly proud of the jobs they do. But in an era where less is more, whether it's the number of staff on the job or the terms and conditions they're expected to put up with, is getting harder and harder for them. So that's why GMB has launched our Go Public campaign. We call on the government to invest in public services, replacing at least what local government has lost at the hands of over a decade of Tory cuts. End privatisation and outsourcing, so taxpayers' money goes into the public services, not shareholder pockets. Provide public services that are free at the point of use, from cradle to grave for everyone that needs them. And to finally give fair pay and pensions for our public service workers. Let's end the race to the bottom in workers' terms and conditions. Public service workers properly celebrated and valued for the work they do. GMB are calling time on the outsourcing of public services. It's failed the public and those workers. And finally, conference, that's why we need a radical Labour government to stand up with us for these principles and secure a future for high-quality, accountable public services. Conference, I second.
Composite 8, working hours to be moved by GMB. CW, it says GMB here on my script, but if it's the CW, I apologise. CW.
Tim would have been happy. Chair Conference, Tony Cairns, Communication Workers Union, to move the motion on working hours. We have an industrial strategy, we've seen that moved by Len, and we're talking about insourcing, but at the core of work are people. People who go and sell their labour. And 25 years ago, we saw report after report about the benefits of automation, about artificial intelligence, about how robots were coming to do our jobs, and we were going to live a life of leisure. And the reality, 25 years on, is a tax on sick pay, holiday pay, maternity pay and paternity pay. And flexibility is one way. We see working people with no control over their lives. We see working people camping outside factories so they can be first in the queue to get the pick for the following day's job. And we see at Asda, a great dispute led by the GMB, where workers are told to sign away their terms and conditions or face the sack. Get down to your next Asda picket line and support the GMB. And we see in the CWU, in Royal Mail, the issue of data capture, using to dictate the speed of rounds. It's time for a rethink, and it's time for decisive action. Investment in new technology isn't done to make your job any easier. It's done to extract more profit. The problem isn't artificial intelligence. The problem is capitalism. It's the faster, cheaper race to the bottom that we have to stop. And the New Economics Foundation says that a shorter working week could actually increase productivity. In Germany, in Holland, in the Scandinavian countries, they work less hours and yet their productivity is better than it is in the UK economy. But it's not a revolution. They have 4-day weeks in Amazon. They're only limited to the chief executive and the senior managers. But it can be done. So we need it's an industrial and political issue. And in a state pension age, we're in a situation where people are going to be worked to death. It's time to move on. So we want an ambitious and radical plan on rights for the individual and for the collective in trade unions. This needs to be in legislation, which is why we call for the shorter working week of 32 hours over 10 years. But it's not about, for the trade union movement, for workers just sitting back and waiting for someone to do that job for us. It's about taking a radical agenda for a new deal for workers to employers on a day-to-day basis immediately we leave this conference. The TUC unanimously endorsed a position 2 weeks ago. Worker ownership funds, control over new technology through collective bargaining, and reverse the trend of longer working lives. And an issue I think everyone will agree with, that pay ratios between chief executives and workers should be limited to 20 to 1. 10 to 1. If you can afford to pay your chief executive £800,000, we don't have any problem with that, but you will pay your worker £40,000 if you're going to do it. This is about enshrining trade union values into society. Let's tell those people who are accumulating wealth it was us who made that wealth, and we want a share of it. We want that time off to see our families. Let's go and secure for the workers the full fruits of their labour and equitable distribution by taking those hours back for ourselves. This CWU stood with Jeremy Corbyn through his first leadership campaign and through his second leadership campaign, and we'll stand with him when he gets to number 10, because he's on the side of workers, and that's why we need to enshrine a shorter working week in law.
Can I see Perth and Kinross to second, please?
Chair, Conference, Tricia Duncan, Chair of Perth and Kinross Labour Party and proud Vice Chair of Scottish Labour Women's Committee. I am delighted to be here today representing my CLP and to be supporting CWU in seconding our motion on a 4-day week. And I say a shorter working week with no loss of pay is long overdue. Comrades, I can remember as a young trade union member of CPSA being involved in a discussion on a 4-day week with no loss of pay over 30 years ago. And it is somewhat ironic that we still today have not moved on in that direction. Conference, the Labour and trade union movement fought for 2-day weekends and limits on long hours of work, and the realisation of the 4-day week must be our next challenge. So I call for a new beginning for UK workers, with the Labour Party and trade unions leading the way, and I envisage an exciting chapter ahead where we are united in calling for a 4-day week and implementing the changes necessary. But first of all, let's think about the present situation. Conference, we are seriously concerned that UK workers work longer hours than their European counterparts and work unpaid overtime worth billions of pounds. Of course, it is grossly unfair that this is the world of work for UK workers, But what a detrimental effect on our society. The recent report from Autonomy and the 4-Day Week campaign clearly outlines the health and well-being costs of overwork, and that work-related anxiety, stress or depression accounts for half of all working days lost to ill health, totalling 12.5 million days, with a staggering economic cost of over £5 billion a year. It's disgraceful, Conference. Our current model of work time is causing real harm to workers, and a 4-day week would cut levels of overwork and increase the well-being by delivering a better balance between work, family and leisure. Comrades, this better balance will lead to gender equality being dramatically improved. It is recognised that on average women currently do 60% more unpaid work than men. So moving to the shorter working week as a norm would help change attitudes about gender roles, promote more equal shares of paid and unpaid work, and help revalue jobs traditionally associated with women's work. It would also help men with more time outside paid employment to be active parents and carers. It would also change expectations as part-time becomes the new full-time, enabling more women to take up secure and well-paid employment. Comrades, the Labour Party must now commit to supporting the aims of a lower 4-day week. Conference, I urge you to support this motion, and that we have a key, a central pledge in the manifesto and a key aim of a socialist Labour government led by Jeremy Corbyn.
Right, it is the GMB this time. Composite 9, employment rights. Thank you.
I thought it was early merger talks, President. Good morning, everybody. Tim Roach, GMB General Secretary, proud to move Composite 9 and very proud to see a hall so full with such an important debate. Comrades, in 1979, trade union membership was at its absolute height, its pomp, at 13 million. The statistic today is half that, at just 6.5 million. And as a movement, we have to take some responsibility for that. As when the world of work changed, privatisation, fragmentation, frankly, we were far too slow to respond. Our once proud mines, steelworks, woolen mills, all shut down and shipped offshore, and we were too slow to react. But alongside that, we had government after government, and yes, I include New Labour in this, who systematically dismantled workers' rights and put every obstacle in the way of organising working people. And Conference, it's no coincidence that as trade union membership has declined, so inequality has exploded in the UK. 2019, Tory Britain, where the richest 100 people have the combined wealth of the bottom 19 million. How on earth has it got to this? And what is the real result of this? Amazon owner Jeff Bezos, the richest man on the planet. Well, actually, his wife's just divorced him. I hope she takes the bloody lot, but he was the richest man on the planet, whose workers are literally carried out on stretchers or in accident and emergency ambulances. Asda rakes in the millions while forcing our members with 40 years' service to give away their bank holidays, to give away their paid breaks, and if you don't accept it, then you're sacked on the 2nd of November. Really? Is that the way to treat your loyal workers? Well, GMB are coming and we're fighting. ASOS workers. Thank you. ASOS workers who daren't use the toilet for fear that they won't have a job in the morning. Amazon, Asda, ASOS, and that's just the A's. How has it come to this conference? But yes, GMB are fighting back. Uber. We've taken Uber on every single time in the courts and we've beaten them every single time to show you treat your workers with respect. Hermes, we shamed the courier company Hermes that treating your people as bogusly self-employed by denying them sick pay, by denying them holiday pay was the wrong thing. Now they've done the right thing. They've signed an agreement that 17,500 people will be self-employed plus to get those holidays and sick pay. Well done them. Diageo workers threatening to withdraw their labour if they don't get a fair deal. Harland and Wolff workers in Belfast actually occupying their yard to save it closing. Glasgow women members striking in pursuit of fairness and equality and equal pay, and yes, they won. GMB, we're fighting hard as we are with all of our sister unions doing such fantastic stuff. But it's always with one hand tied behind our back. Because that's what you get when the people who benefit from the system are the same people who design the system, who run the system and who milk the system. Well, conference, it's time to change the system. Change the system for the carers and cleaners, school support staff, shipbuilders, refuse workers, receptionists. By taking back political power, we won't just win in Westminster, we'll win in workplaces right across the country in the biggest expansion of workers' rights in a generation. Labour's policies, Ministry of Employment Rights, puts employers on notice that the free market, free loading, free for all is going to be a thing of the past. Just think of this one bit of this massive policy. Sectoral collective bargaining with a guaranteed living rate for all workers. That for the first time, unions will be able to negotiate upwards, so Labour creating a race to the top rather than the Tories' race to the bottom. That's what we're talking about. And it's on that basis, conference, that we leave here united Wednesday, united in the fight to return a Jeremy Corbyn-led Labour government into number 10. I move. Thank you.
Can I see our store to second, please?
Dave McCrossan, Usdaw, Deputy General Secretary, seconding the composite on employment rights. Conference, the Tories have continued their attacks on trade unions over a number of years, and this has led to a massive drop in the number of people covered by collective bargaining. And this, in turn, has resulted in workers not getting the pay increases they deserve or the working hours that they need, and indeed the shift in working patterns that they might need in order to carry out their caring responsibilities. Conference, we need a Labour government. We need a Labour government and a Ministry of Employment Rights to turn this tide and give people, working people, a real voice in their workplace. So Labour is proposing sector-wide collective bargaining, which will start to deal with the evil that is poverty pay and improve workers' pay and conditions. But for pay and conditions and collective bargaining to be really effective, we need to make sure we have well-organised workplaces. There are too many anti-union employers, as Tim's just listed. Companies like Aldi, companies like Lidl, who flatly refuse to recognise or even discuss matters with trade unions. And worse, they won't even let us speak to their workers. Working people should have a right to listen to what trade unions have to say, and trade unions should have a legal right to access those people. We also need to remove the hurdles that have deliberately been put in place by the Tories to ensure that they can't have us negotiating on their behalf. It should be easier for trade unions to trigger ballots to make sure that we can represent workers in the workplaces, because only through trade union organisation and collective bargaining will workers get a fair deal in the workplace. But conference, actions speak louder than words. When we leave conference at the end of this week, we need to do one thing. We need to go back, we need to speak to our friends, our workmates, our colleagues, and urge them to create an army of activists that will vote to get rid of Boris Johnson and the nasty party and put Jeremy Corbyn at number 10. I move. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I see, hopefully, the CWU to move composite 10, Royal Mail?
Yeah, conference, Dave Wall, Communication Workers Union. And in the next few weeks, you will see CW postal workers deliver a massive turnout and yes vote for strike action in our dispute against Royal Mail. There are two reasons why I'm very confident that this will happen. The first is that we've built a machine that combines cutting-edge communications, incredible use of social media, and that most traditional thing that trade unions can never forget, face-to-face meetings with your members, getting them behind the union, getting them to stand together. Secondly, we know, postal workers know, we face the fight of our lives. Literally, to defend over 100,000 jobs, to defend UK postal services and to defend the future of our industry, we will be opposing the complete direction that Royal Mail want to take us in. We've been on a journey. We've been on a journey of liberalisation, of privatisation, and through the strength of a workplace-based union, we've been able to fend off, thus far, most of the worst aspects and destructive aspects of asset stripping and of breaking up the company that privatisation inevitably brings. So what's changed? Well, we've now got a new CEO. He don't actually work in the UK. He runs the company from abroad. And he wants to bring in all of the techniques that he's made millions and millions of pounds on in a company called GLS, described in an internal investigation in Germany as a company that uses modern-day slavery methods. That's the person that's currently leading the postal services in the UK. Now, our members, we know that what we're going to see, the first part of it is breaking up into a small parcel business, and the strategy is to let the rest of the industry wither on the vine. We have fought against this all our lives, and we are not going to accept it. We will fight to every last breath, to every point that we can make across the whole of the UK to stop this. And conference, it doesn't have to be this way. I urge you to look at the vision that's set out in the terms of this motion, a vision that's been worked up with the leadership of the Labour Party and all of the front bench team. It offers a blueprint for every industry that's been privatised. It talks about how you can expand the role of postal workers, rebuilding our communities, making sure that we can contribute to growing local economies. It talks about maximum pay ratios of 20:1 being enforced in a renationalised Royal Mail. And for our delivery workers, we have to control the use of technology. Being a postal worker out on delivery used to be about having the chance to make your own decisions about what you did. Now it's like being tagged every minute of the day like a criminal, and it's got to stop. So conference, our members are watching this debate. It's being live streamed to our members. And we want to know that every single delegate in this hall, that the whole of the Labour Party is behind postal workers in this dispute. Are you behind us? We want to know. Wait a minute. Just a few more seconds. Thank you, conference. Just a couple of final things we want to know. Are you behind the vision of renationalisation that's set out in this motion that will change and shift the balance of forces back in favour of workers? Are you behind that? Yeah. And one more. If I could give you a vote today for strike action in our ballot, would you vote yes? Yes! It's the people's post, it's the people's jobs, and it's the people that are going to win. I move.
Before you speak, delegate, I'm just going to take a round so they can be ready to speak when you've finished. So hold your horses, and I need 3. We've only got time for 3. I'll take, in the glasses and the Labour T-shirt. Sorry, I want to see. Yes, so you're waving at me. You've got long blonde hair, and you've got pink, and I am going to take women and BAME delegates because we need to increase the diversity of the speakers this morning. The woman in the checked shirt and glasses. Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, Conference, Kate Osborne, Unite member and Royal Mail worker, proud to second this motion on Royal Mail and show solidarity with our comrades in the CWU. Conference, Unite organises managers and senior staff in Royal Mail, and we too have seen threats to our members' job security and an environment that has seen morale amongst our membership drop to an unprecedented low. In 2017, we also made a similar pledge to the CWU as Royal Mail attacked paying conditions in the continuing race to the bottom. That future cannot be built on sand and the weak foundations of privatisation, deregulation and ever more insecure contracting and employment models. Conference, we support the fight against privatisation and will continue to support the campaign to defend our Royal Mail, Parcel Force, Post Office, returning them to where they belong in public ownership under a Labour government who are already committed to do it. We will stand united with the CWU in our fight for the future of this vital public service and the dedicated people who work for it. Unite is proud to stand with the CWU, and I ask Conference to do the same. We are behind you.
Thank you.
Conference, Charlotte Childs, speaking in support. Hi. Speaking in support of motions, Composite 6 on an industrial strategy. Conference, I'm here speaking in support of a coherent and radical industrial strategy. I'm from Scunthorpe and I started my working life as an apprentice electrician on the steelworks there. It's also where I found my place in the trade union movement and the labour movement. Conference, during my 11 years on the steelworks, we went through numerous restructures, being passed from investment bankers to investment bankers, seeing parts of the plant closed and thousands of jobs lost. The Tories' free market economics, implemented by Thatcher, perpetuated by New Labour and adopted by the current cabinet, are not working, and they're destroying communities like mine that I grew up in. Scunthorpe needs a Labour government and it needs a proper industrial strategy investing in sustainable jobs and innovations that will future-proof our cornerstone industries. The infrastructure improvements needed desperately in this country will need Scunthorpe Steel. It's where we make the best rail in the world. We need to get rid of the arrogant and spiteful Tory government that don't give a crap about communities like ours. Further to that, we must nationalise key industries such as steel and rail, protecting our jobs, families and communities. Nationalise now and protect our jobs. Thank you, Conference.
Good morning, Conference. Claire Keogh, Kingston and Surbiton, CLP, speaking in favour of a 4-day working week. Trade unions and the labour movement were built to fight for the workers' right to a healthy, safe working environment, but also to ensure a happy, fulfilled life outside of work. Technological advances have left the bosses richer than ever, but workers are worse off. While profits have grown, wages have stagnated. As a workforce, we are more anxious, more depressed, with 57% of working days lost last year being down to work-related stress and poor mental health, according to the HSE. Some on 0 hours contracts are waiting by the phone to find out if they have a shift at all this week, while others work 50, 60, 70-hour weeks just to make ends meet, to the detriment of their health, their social lives, their families. So on the one hand, we have people desperately seeking work, and on the other, we have those in work losing days to work-related stress and sickness. Now, the bosses would rather we didn't organise collectively, so we have to be united in finding a solution that benefits us all. In the face of attacks on the workforce, we cannot look towards incremental change, but bold and courageous change. We have an opportunity to use new technology to our advantage, to workers' and society's advantage, ensuring that we, the workers, and not just the bosses, benefit from increased wealth and surplus time. Instead of fearing what automation might mean in 10 years' time, we must see that we have an incredible opportunity now to ensure that more of us are able to work, but also that we are able to work less, fewer hours, and share in the profits of greater productivity with real flexibility and work-life balance. Our movement, the Labour Party, the trade unions, must lead the way to ensure a full, strong workforce enjoys the fruits of its labour with a reduced working week with no loss of pay. Workers need bread, but we demand roses too. Please support the motion.
Conference, Pam Cyan, Unison, speaking in support of Composite 9, Ministry of Employment Rights. Conference, many of us here in the hall today know from our own experiences or of those of our families and friends that working life can be a good and rewarding experience, where healthy balance is struck between work and life, where pay, pensions and progressions are up for negotiations, and where strong trade unions act as a counterweight on our behalf, ensuring that we are taken seriously, respected and able to have real say over the work that we are organised in. But of course we also know, again through our own experiences or of those of our families and friends, that we are the lucky ones and that far too many working today, for far too many working today, life is shaped by huge powers of imbalances, where workers are at the beck and call of employers, where the workforce is treated like commodities to be bought and sold in the labour market, and where employers have no sense of responsibility for anything except their bottom line. Employers like this have thrived under this Tory government. The Trade Union Act has made it harder for trade unions to fight back and promote the labour market policies that have been characterised by the expulsion of 0 hours and other types of short hours contracts in the public and private sectors, through growth of bogus self-employment and the longest sustained fall in real-term pay since the 19th century. We need to send a clear message from this conference in a language that everyone will understand, that a Labour government will fix the world of work and ensure that all employees are respected by their employers and are able to work in dignity. Please support. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Thank you, Conference. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce the Shadow Chancellor, John McDonnell.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Conrad. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Look. Can I just say thank you very much. Look, all the warmth of that welcome I take as a response to the hard work of my whole Shadow Treasury team, and I want to thank them as often the unsung heroes of my team. Peter Dowd is the Chief Secretary and MP for what he describes as the small fishing village of Bootle on Merseyside. Jonathan Reynolds, our missionary we send into the City of London to preach socialism. And Annalise Dodds, who's just brilliantly masterminding our programme to tackle tax avoidance
and tax evasion. Annalise has found that magic money tree in the Cayman Islands, and she's digging it up and bringing it here. And Clive Lewis, always getting into scrape after scrape, impressing through our radical green agenda with courage and vigour. And also, I want to thank Lynn Brown. Lynn's the conscience of our party in ensuring everything we do will secure social justice and equality for all that need it. Finally, my parliamentary private secretary, Thelma Walker, she brings her skills as a former head teacher to ensure we all do our homework and we deliver on every occasion. Thanks, Thelma, for all that you do. I want to pay tribute to others as well. I want to pay tribute to the GMB workers who work for ASDA, who have been threatened with the sack for Christmas if they don't sign up for the worst contract. Here they are. Solidarity. I just say this, comrades, we'll support you all the way in standing up to these bullies. We'll support you all the way. And let me say to Dave Ward as well, I heard his speech earlier, Dave from the CWU. Look, as far as I'm concerned, the role of a Labour MP is, yes, to support in Parliament, but also on the picket line. So whether it's in Parliament or on the picket line, Dave, we will be with you in this campaign. I want to thank a friend of mine. He's a mate who almost accidentally became the leader of the Labour Party. And I just want to say this, he's given us, our team, 100% support. And what makes me so proud of him is that, you know, no matter what the smears and personal attacks by the gutter press, he always responds and embodies the kinder, gentler politics he advocates. And I'm so proud of Jeremy Corbyn. Look, your singing's improving. Not much, but improving. Let me just say, cut it out. My fear, though, at the moment is that, and it's a genuine fear, my fear is that as a result of the behaviour, the language, and the cynical opportunism of some politicians on the right, I think we've entered a period of profound insecurity and risk to our democratic system. I don't say this lightly. We've seen before in our history what kind of forces can be unleashed by politicians who have a complete disregard for the truth in their ruthless pursuit of power for power's sake. Politicians who attack the very institutions and practices, no matter how flawed they are, the institutions and practices that uphold our democracy. They attack Parliament, the courts, the rule of law. And I tell you, the best antidote to those who attack our democratic rules and institutions is more democracy itself. That's why we're right. We're right in our aim to trust the people in having the final say on Brexit, a deal or remain. We are right to go back and trust the people. Some of you will know I've said that I'll campaign for Remain, but let me make it absolutely clear. I profoundly respect those who support a genuine alternative. And I agree we need to root through this that Jeremy is offering to ensure that we bring our party and country together again. In our debates today, I want us to demonstrate the respect we show each other and how we can bring our party together, and just how, as a result of that, we can also bring the country back together again. And I warn those who would revoke Article 50 without a democratic mandate. Just ask yourselves what message that sends to our people. An old professor of mine, Bernard Crick, was once asked to define socialism in one sentence, and he said, "Socialism is the achievement of equality through democracy." We can't say to people, Labour wants you to share in the running of your workplace, your community and your environment, but we don't trust you to have the final say over Brexit. Nothing. I believe nothing would do more to undermine their faith in democracy in all its forms. We'd run the risk of losing the confidence we've built up in people in using democracy, yes, to change the world. The blossoming of hope and radical thought that we've seen over the last 3 to 4 years. The potential to turn that radicalism and that hope into transforming lives, increasing fulfilment and happiness for the many. That's what we're about. Equality through democracy, the definition of socialism. The transforming lives means, I suppose before everything else, yes, having enough to get by, but not just to scrape by, also to live a rich and fulfilling life. And millions today, after 9 years of Tory austerity, millions today know how hard it is to do that, just worrying about getting to the end of the month. So transforming people's lives means ending the modern evil of in-work poverty. Now, Labour has traditionally been committed to full employment. We've always believed that getting a job should mean you're lifted out of poverty. You lift yourself out of poverty. But under the Tories, the link between work and escaping poverty has been broken. So I commit today that within the first term of office, Labour will end in-work poverty in this country. End it. End it. That means completely transforming the way our economy works. We'll restore full trade union rights back in this country once again. Once again. We'll fulfill the promise of our leader that those workplace rights will apply from day one of employment. We'll roll out collective bargaining to enable workers to get their fair share of what they produce. And yes, we'll bring in a real living wage of at least £10 an hour. We'll end the barbaric rollout of universal credit. We'll cap rents and we'll build 1 million new homes that our people need. And We want to build those million new affordable homes so young people in particular aren't pouring away thousands of pounds from their wages to rip off landlords exploiting them as a result of the current housing shortage brought about by the Tories. And yes, work isn't just about wages. It's about freedom from drudgery, having dignity and respect and a voice in the workplace. What does that mean? It means a strong trade union movement and collective bargaining, but also in the new public services we're creating, it means management by workers and service using themselves rather than some remote bureaucrats in Whitehall. Self-management by workers. It also means, yes, a tenth of shares being owned by those workers themselves. It means our commitment to doubling the size of our cooperative sector and going further, I hope, in our ambitions. But you know, our commitment to every worker, therefore, is that wherever you work, you will have a stake and you will have a say in the future of your working environment, the company and firm you work for, and yes, how you're treated at work. But you know, it's not just about a fulfilling life at work. I've always believed we should work to live, not live to work. And so, look at the history of this. In the 1860s, people worked a 65-hour week. And thanks to past Labour governments, but actually mainly thanks to the trade union movement, by the 1970s, the average working week had been reduced to 43 hours. As society got richer, we could spend fewer hours at work. But in recent decades, progress has stalled. People in our country work some of the longest hours in Europe. And since the 1980s, the link between increasing productivity and expanded free time has been broken. It's time to put that right. So I can tell you today that the next Labour government will reduce the average full-time working week to 32 hours within the next decade. It will be a shorter working week with no loss of pay. As a first step, and this has been a real bugbear of some of us, as a first step, we'll end the opt-out from the European Working Time Directive. Yes, and we'll roll out sectoral collective bargaining. We'll include negotiations over working hours within that. We'll require working hours to be included in legally binding sectoral agreements between employers and trade unions. This will allow the unions and employers to decide how best to reduce hours for their particular sector. And we'll set up a working time commission with the power to recommend to government on increasing statutory leave entitlements as quickly as possible without increasing unemployment. But you know, while millions are exhausted from overwork, there are too many others who can't get the working hours they need. So let's make it clear, absolutely clear. We'll also ban zero-hour contracts to make sure every employee, we will make sure we will make sure every employee has a guaranteed number of hours a week. And you know, I told this story at the TUC, I think, last year. My dad was on the Liverpool docks, and his generation were those dockers who used to stand at the side of the street and then get picked by a ganger to see whether or not they got work that day or not, and if they weren't picked, they didn't get work. zero-hour contracts are the same level as exploitation as my father and grandfather experienced in the 1930s. And you know, when people work those hours, our real living wage will make sure that people earn enough to live on. It's not just enough to give people power over their working lives. We believe in extending democracy across the board. And we know one of the most urgent tasks that we face when we go into government will be to rebuild local democracy, rebuild those local council services decimated by the Conservatives and, yes, the Lib Dems as well when they were in government. My generation inherited a treasure of public parks, libraries, swimming pools and leisure centres, free or affordable for all. But you know, in too many cases now they're gone. They've been privatised or they've priced out the families they were built for. These public assets meant a better life for millions of us. And they were part of the welfare state that our movement, our Labour governments fought for and built, providing free at the point of use the things that made life worth living. I believe we shouldn't limit our ambition to simply repairing the damage caused by 9 years of Tory cuts. We've got to go further. Got to go further. So today I'm launching a document on universal basic services. It lays out our belief. It lays out our belief that everyone has a right to a good life, that the state has a responsibility to make good on that right by providing public services free at the point of use. These services are part of our shared experiences, experiences that are too important to be left to the market, whether a family can afford them or not, or whether they receive them or not. As socialists, let's be clear. Let's make it absolutely clear to everyone. We believe that people have the right to education, health, a home and a decent environment, and yes, access to culture and leisure. I fervently believe the right to dignity in retirement is part of that right to health. Older people have the right to that dignity at every stage of their lives. And you know as well as I do, the truth is our social care system at the moment is a national scandal. There's been nearly £8 billion taken from council budgets for social care since 2010. The result is 1 million people not getting the care that they need. Immense scale of human suffering and stress placed upon them and their families. More than 5 million unpaid carers, most of them women, looking after loved ones. And overworked, underpaid care workers only being allowed 10-minute visits to those they care for because the current system won't pay for more. A report last week demonstrated how, at the same time, many of the big care providers have developed highly complex corporate structures, yes, and involving offshore tax havens, sucking even more money out of the system. So I can announce today, after years of campaigning by trade unions and carers, as the first building block in our new National Care Service, the next Labour government will introduce personal care, free at the point of use in England. It will be funded. It will be funded not through Conservatives' gimmicky insurance schemes, but like the NHS and other essentials, it will be funded through a fair taxation system where everybody pays their way. We're publishing the first steps of our National Care Service vision today, investing in the workforce and ensuring that those care workers they're employed on local authority rates of pay, working conditions and training to deliver the high-quality care as Unison and the GMB have advocated for so long. Over time, we'll bring those services back into public ownership and democratic control. We'll ensure that local councils have the necessary resources after years of savage cuts, building up the capacity in local government for both care homes and domiciliary care, back under public democratic control. And as a start, we'll require all providers, public, private or charitable, to adhere to strict criteria on ethical standards. Because I believe, and I believe you share this belief, there's nothing more important than dignity in retirement for those who built our country and given younger generations the world we live in today. It is a debt of honour. I want to say a personal thank you to the hard work and leadership that Barbara Keeley has shown in driving forward the policy on this issue over years so that we can achieve the breakthrough today. Barbara Keeley. Of course, as you know, in Scotland, a government has already introduced free personal care. A Labour government introduced free personal care. So when we spend the billions needed to guarantee free personal care in England, there actually will be billions more for First Minister Richard Leonard when he takes office in 2021. A Labour government making millions of lives better across the UK thanks to our transformative policies in Westminster, but also through the new resources for the Scottish and Welsh governments as we roll out our transformative policies. But you know, of all the universal rights that we hold dear, I suppose nothing is more important than the right to survival, the survival of our planet. I believe when historians write about 2019, the most important political event so far has not been the replacement of one useless Tory Prime Minister with another one. It's a consistent pattern. It's been the emergence of climate change as the most important political question of the day. Nobody has done more in Parliament than my colleagues Sue Hayman and Rebecca Long-Bailey to pave the way for Parliament declaring a climate emergency this year. And outside Parliament, I want to pay tribute. Just the exhilaration of it. I want to pay tribute to the school strikers and Extinction Rebellion. I've been so proud. I've been so proud to march and demonstrate alongside them. Despite the climatic conditions, they always seem to choose a day when it's raining. They've shamed older generations of politicians into taking climate change seriously and with the urgency it needs. Now it's essential that the Labour movement continues to join in solidarity with those young people to help lead that fight. And for my part, I will make sure the Treasury puts in whatever resources are necessary to meet our climate change obligations. Whatever is necessary. We will have, as you know, we're setting up a sustainable investment board coordinating the Treasury, the Business Department and the Bank of England. £250 billion of green government investment in our National Transformation Fund. £250 billion more of lending through our National Investment Bank, delivered at grassroots by regional development banks and our new Post Bank. And let me make this clear as well, while the Labour government will need to take the lead, yes, with state investment, we'll make whatever forms are necessary to ensure the finance sector isn't pushing the other way by investing in carbon-intensive sectors for the future. That means billions more raised through green bonds and support for a European Green New Deal programme so that we can bring forward significantly that 2050 date. We're mobilising financial resources on a scale not seen since the post-war reconstruction to achieve the twin goals of a sustainable future and a better today. In July, at our inaugural International Social Forum, I reiterated our support for socialist internationalism. We recognise that the first industrial revolution meant Britain was the first major contributor to climate change, something that left a lasting legacy for the Global South. And to begin making some reparations for our colonial past, I pledge we will provide the citizens of the Global South free or cheap access to the green technologies that we develop as part of our green industrial revolution. It is only just. And we'll work with other countries and social movements across the globe to reform the major international bodies, to enable them to coordinate the global response to climate change. There's an old trade union saying, the cause of Labour is the hope of the world. Here in Britain, it's the Labour Party that's carrying that hope into this century. The hope of a world where the riches of our planet are shared. The hope of the world with the chance for everyone to realise their full potential. And we know, look, we know we won't build that world overnight. And let nobody tell you it will be easy or that it won't face enormous resistance. I tell you this, I believe our time is coming. Time to start work on that historic mission, to lay the foundations of a new world. And you know, sometime in the future, when they ask you, where were you when our people were left to sleep on the streets? When families queued at food banks to survive? When the Tories tried to sell our country out to Trump? When climate change threatened our planet and our very existence? I want you to be able to say, I built the homes and the public services our people needed. I want you to be able to say, I made sure everyone was fed and cared for, with nobody forced to endure poverty. I want you to be able to say, I saved the planet by tackling climate change. I helped lay the foundations of that new society, foundations so deeply rooted that no Tory in the future can ever break them up. And when they ask you, how did you do that? You can tell them, I supported Labour. I joined Labour. I voted for Jeremy Corbyn. I elected a Labour government. That's how. Solidarity.
It's been a long time coming, but I know yes it will. It's been too hard living, but I'm afraid to die. I don't know what's up there beyond the sky. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes it will. I go to the movie and I go downtown. Somebody keep telling me don't hang around. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes it will.
Right, thank you, John. That was pretty good. Thank you, conference. Sure, I speak for everyone when we say we can't wait to get you into number 11. We now move on to the international debate. So to begin with, we have an NEC statement on Brexit, and to move the statement on behalf of the NEC, I call Yasmin Dar.
Good afternoon, conference. My comrades, my brothers and sisters, socialists, welcome. My name's Yasmin Dar and I am one of the elected CLP representatives on the National Executive Committee.